Okay, so picture this, right? You're at a fancy restaurant. You're enjoying this nice, delicious meal, and as you reach for the check, this nagging question pops into your mind. Like how much should I tip?
Yeah.
It's this familiar dilemma. I mean, we've all faced it countless times,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
But have you ever stopped to wonder where this whole tipping custom even came from? Like how did we get here?
Yeah. It's a question that I think most people don't think twice about. But the history of tipping, like if you really dig into it, it's surprisingly complex.
Hmm.
And it might even make you rethink this seemingly harmless practice that we do all the time.
Well, today we are diving deep into the fascinating and honestly often very controversial world of tipping in America.
Hmm.
You might be surprised to learn that this custom, something we often just kind of take for granted, was once, get this, considered deeply un-American.
Oh, yeah.
Un-American.
Yeah, for a really long time, actually. For much of American history, tipping was met with, like, a lot of resistance. A lot of people saw it as this, like, vestige of Europe's class-based society,
Hmm.
which, really kind of betrayed the egalitarian ideals, the whole thing that America was founded upon.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. We got some really incredible insights from an NPR episode of Throughline. You know that show Throughline?
Yeah, yeah.
And they explored this very topic. They featured this journalist and author, Nina Martyris,
Yeah.
who she wrote this article called "When Tipping Was Considered Deeply Un-American," and it all starts way back in 17th century Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, we even see it documented, pretty early on, 1668, in the Diary of Samuel Pepys.
Okay.
He was a famous London diarist who he meticulously recorded like all of his expenses. Even every tip he gave.
Right.
So it was like deeply ingrained in the social fabric, back then.
So tipping wasn't just about rewarding good service. It was baked into the structure of society itself.
Yeah. Precisely. It stemmed from the feudal system where, the wealthy were expected to provide for those who serve them.
Mm-hmm.
And tipping was seen as like an extension of this obligation. It was a way for the upper classes to kind of acknowledge the lower classes' subservience.
Hmm. It almost sounds like a form of social control then, like a way to reinforce those existing power dynamics.
I think that's a really astute observation, and that's precisely why tipping was so jarring to a lot of Americans when it first arrived on these shores. It really clashed with their ideals of equality, self-reliance, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, all of that.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, how did something so seemingly, at odds with those American values? I mean, how did it manage to take root and become so pervasive? How did we get to where we are today?
Well, that's where the story takes, I think, a pretty fascinating turn. The turning point kind of came after the Civil War, which was, obviously a time of like immense social and economic upheaval in the United States.
Right. Yeah, the post-Civil War era, a period of Reconstruction, and unfortunately, as we'll see, a period of continued exploitation.
That's a good point. You're right, and it's in this context that we see tipping becoming increasingly common. One of the key drivers was the rise of the Pullman Car Company.
The Pullman Car Company. Now, for those who don't know, that company, they kind of revolutionized train travel. They offered pretty luxurious accommodations for passengers who were journeying across the expanding nation.
Yeah, but behind that opulent facade, I guess you could say, there was a system that relied pretty heavily actually on the exploitation of black porters. And these porters were often formerly enslaved people, people who were seeking new opportunities, but they were paid a meager wage. I mean, $27.50 a month, which is,
That's heartbreaking to think that these individuals who had endured so much, they were still being subject to such paltry wages.
Yeah, and to make matters worse, the Pullman Company, they expected these porters to rely on tips, tips from passengers to actually supplement their income. So it essentially shifted the burden of like fair compensation onto the passengers themselves.
So a system that was originally intended as like this gesture of goodwill was now being used to to justify paying workers like less than a living wage.
Exactly. And as train travel, as it became more popular, tipping porters it became the norm. And this practice really helped normalize, tipping more broadly. And it extended its reach, beyond just those employed by the Pullman Company.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like tipping became this contagious thing,
Yeah.
spreading from one industry to another.
It's a great way to put it. And soon, restaurants, they started adopting similar practices. They were hiring formerly enslaved people as waiters and cooks, but offering them very little, if any, wages at all. They too were expected to rely on tips, tips from customers to make ends meet.
It's unsettling how this custom that was originally rooted in European class structures was then used to exploit newly freed individuals, here in America.
It's a stark reminder that even in the aftermath of a war that was fought over freedom and equality, the struggle for like true economic justice, it was far from over. And this brings us to the rise of the anti-tipping movement in America.
Okay, so even as tipping was gaining this traction,
Yeah.
there were people who saw through the facade, right?
Yeah.
They recognized the inherent problems, the contradictions.
Absolutely. Journalists, public figures, everyday citizens, they began speaking out against tipping. They denounced it as un-American, and a threat to the nation's, democratic ideals.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's remarkable to think that there was like this widespread movement against tipping. It really highlights, I think, how deeply some people felt about this issue.
Yeah, I think they saw it as like a form of servitude that undermined the dignity of both the giver and the receiver.
One group that really stood out during this period was the Anti-Tipping Society of America.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, they were incredibly vocal.
Yeah, they had over 100,000 members who pledged to abstain from tipping for a whole year. I know, and they published pamphlets and they organized protests to try to raise awareness about the evils of tipping.
100,000 people refusing to tip for a whole year. I mean, that's a serious commitment to this cause.
It really shows just how strongly some people felt about this. They saw tipping as like a slippery slope, like it would lead to a more stratified and unequal society.
So they weren't just fighting like for the price of a meal. They were fighting for like a vision of America where everyone was treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their occupation.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. They believed that true equality meant fair wages for all, right? Not a system where workers were depending on the whims of their customers.
Yeah, it's inspiring to think that even back then there were people who were willing to challenge the status quo, to fight for a more just and equitable society.
Yeah. Their efforts really laid the groundwork for later labor movements, and they continue to resonate with those who advocate for fair wages and worker rights today.
What's really fascinating to me about this whole anti-tipping movement is it really emerged at a time when America was kind of on the cusp of major like economic and social change.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution was transforming the workforce. New ideas about labor rights were starting to gain some traction.
So the debate about tipping, it was happening against like this backdrop of these broader societal shifts.
Exactly. And it's in this context that we see the introduction of the federal minimum wage in 1938,
right?
Which was this landmark achievement for workers' rights, right? And that seems like it would have been like a death knell for tipping, right? Like if workers were guaranteed this fair wage, then why would they even need to rely on the whims of customers?
Well, it's a logical assumption, but the reality was a lot more complicated, I guess you could say. You see, restaurant workers, they were initially excluded from the minimum wage law.
Wait, what? Why? Why would they be excluded? I mean, that seems incredibly unfair.
Yeah. It was a compromise, really, born out of intense lobbying by the restaurant industry. They argue that requiring them to pay their servers a full minimum wage, it would just like cripple their businesses.
So instead of like embracing this new era of fair labor practices, they found a loophole to continue exploiting their workers.
Essentially, yeah. They successfully convinced lawmakers to allow them to pay tipped workers what they called a subminimum wage, with the expectation that tips would make up the difference.
So the tip credit was born.
Exactly. This tip credit, as it's called, allowed restaurants to pay their servers a fraction, really, of the full minimum wage, and basically shifting the burden of compensation onto the shoulders of customers.
It's amazing to me how a law that was like designed to protect workers ended up like further entrenching the very system that it was supposed to dismantle.
Yeah, it's a classic example of unintended consequences,
Yeah.
and to make matters worse, this subminimum wage it's remained stagnant for decades. In 1996, the restaurant lobby they successfully lobbied to freeze it at a paltry $2.13 an hour.
$2.13 an hour.
Mm.
I mean, that's barely enough to cover a single bus ride, let alone, rent or groceries or any of the other essentials that most of us just take for granted.
Yeah, it's a shockingly low wage, and I think it really highlights the systemic inequalities that are just baked into the tipping system.
So despite like decades of progress, right, in other areas of labor rights, tipped workers,
Yeah.
they remain like trapped in this system that allows for like rampant exploitation.
Yeah, and it's not just restaurant workers who are affected by this. Over the years, tipping it's spread to countless other service industries. Right,
Right.
we now tip baristas, hairstylists, taxi drivers, delivery drivers, even hotel housekeepers.
It's become like this automatic expectation, almost regardless of the quality of service or the
Mhm.
worker's like actual wage.
Exactly. It's as if tipping has become like the default mode of compensation for anyone who provides a service. It's created this culture where workers are kind of incentivized to prioritize customer satisfaction above all else.
Which can be like incredibly problematic, right? Especially when you consider the potential for harassment or discrimination or even wage theft.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It creates this power imbalance, right, where workers are constantly striving to please customers in order to earn a decent income. And this dynamic can be very easily abused. And it leaves workers vulnerable to all sorts of exploitation.
It's unsettling to think about the pressure that this puts on workers, especially those in low wage industries who are already facing so much economic hardship. It's almost like a modern day form of indentured servitude.
Yeah. And let's not forget the demographics of the tipped workforce, right? Women and people of color, they're disproportionately represented in these roles, making them even more susceptible to these systemic inequities.
It's like we've taken this antiquated practice from feudal Europe and somehow managed to make it even more insidious in the modern era.
It's a real contradiction, isn't it? I mean, we pride ourselves on our democratic values, yet we tolerate this system that allows for such blatant exploitation.
It really makes you wonder, is tipping truly an expression of generosity, or is it a relic of a bygone era, like a system that was designed to maintain power imbalances and perpetuate economic inequality?
That's a really good question. It's a question worth pondering. What started as a small gesture of appreciation has evolved into this complex and often very problematic system with far-reaching consequences. And perhaps by understanding the history of tipping, maybe we can start to imagine a future where all workers are treated with dignity and respect regardless of their profession.
It's a powerful thought, and one that I think resonates, deeply with anyone who values fairness and justice. But let's be honest, like dismantling a system as deeply ingrained as tipping. I mean, it's no easy feat.
Yeah, you're right. It would require a fundamental shift in our collective mindset, I think.
Yeah.
We would need to rethink our relationship with work, with value, with compensation, recognizing that everyone deserves a living wage, regardless of whether they, serve us food or drive us around or style our hair. Yeah.
It's a tall order, but not an impossible one, right? I mean, after all, I mean, as we've learned today, social and economic systems, they're not static.
Yeah.
They can and do change over time, often in response to social movements and changing values.
Exactly. And you know what's particularly striking to me about this whole story
Hmm.
is that, while America was like doubling down on tipping Europe, where the custom originated
Right.
was moving in the opposite direction.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you need to tell me that the birthplace of tipping essentially abandoned the practice. Like how did that even happen?
Well, they opted for a more straightforward approach. They call it the service charge.
Ah, the service charge.
Yeah.
Right. That makes so much more sense. So instead of leaving it up to individual customers to determine
Yeah.
a worker's worth, they just built this set fee into the bill.
Exactly. That way, the cost of service is distributed among all patrons, and workers. They receive a more stable, predictable income without having to rely on the whims of individual tippers.
It's such a logical solution. It removes like all the ambiguity, right? The power dynamics, the potential for exploitation.
Yeah.
So I mean, why didn't America adopt a similar approach?
Well, remember the powerful restaurant lobby that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They've consistently opposed any attempts to eliminate tipping. They argue that it would raise menu prices, that it would hurt business.
But wouldn't a service charge? I mean, wouldn't it essentially accomplish the same thing? It just makes the true cost of dining out more transparent.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? But the restaurant industry has been incredibly successful at framing tipping as a benefit for both workers and customers.
It's amazing, how they've managed to spin a system that allows them to pay their employees less than minimum wage into something that seems like beneficial to everyone.
It's a testament to their lobbying power, and their ability to really shape public perception. They've managed to convince a lot of people that tipping is a way to reward good service. Even though studies have shown that the correlation between tip size and service quality is often weak at best.
So we're left with this system where workers are at the mercy of these arbitrary tips. They're subject to the whims of customers and the power dynamics that are inherent in this whole exchange. It's a far cry, I think, from the ideals of equality and fairness that we claim to uphold.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It really makes you wonder. Is tipping truly an expression of generosity, or is it a relic of a bygone era? Is it a system that was designed to maintain these power imbalances and to perpetuate economic inequality? Yeah, it really is. It says a lot about the power of the restaurant lobby and their ability to kind of maintain the status quo, even when it's clearly not in the best interests of their workers.
Yeah, it's frustrating to see that, but it also, I think, gives us like a glimpse of what a different future could look like.
Right. Exactly. But by looking at how other countries have handled this whole tipping thing, we can start to imagine alternative models that could work here in America.
So what can we learn from Europe's experience? Like how did they manage to transition away from tipping?
Well, as we mentioned, earlier, a lot of European countries, they've adopted this service charge model, right, where a set percentage is just added to the bill to cover the cost of service.
Okay, and then this service charge, it's distributed, among the staff, ensuring that everyone receives, a fair and consistent wage.
Right. It kind of takes the guesswork out of tipping
Right.
for both the customer and the worker, right?
Right.
You know exactly what you're paying for, and the workers, they know exactly what they'll be earning.
Yeah, it sounds like a win-win, a win-win situation. So why haven't we embraced this model here in America?
Well, the restaurant industry, they've put forth a number of arguments
Hmm.
against it. They claim that it would raise menu prices, that it would hurt business, and that it would eliminate the incentive for workers to provide excellent service.
Hmm. But those arguments, I mean, they don't really hold up to scrutiny, do they? Like a service charge. I mean, it's essentially the same as a tip. It just makes the cost more transparent, right?
You're right. And as for the incentive argument, I mean, studies have shown that tipping it doesn't necessarily lead to better service. In fact,
Mm.
it can often create a dynamic where workers they feel pressure to prioritize customer satisfaction over their own, well-being.
So it seems like the real reason that the restaurant industry clings to tipping is because it allows them to keep labor costs as low, and therefore profits high.
Yeah, that's a harsh reality, but I think it's one that we need to confront if we want to create a more equitable,
Yeah.
system for everyone.
So what can we, I mean, what can we as individuals do to push for change? I mean, it can
Yeah.
feel like overwhelming, to think about taking on like such a deeply entrenched system.
No, I understand that, but even small actions, they can make a difference. I think the first step is just to educate ourselves,
Yeah.
to understand the history, the power dynamics, the potential for exploitation that are baked into the system,
Yeah.
and once we have that understanding, then we can start having conversations, right?
Yeah.
With our friends, with our family, and even the businesses that we patronize.
Yeah, yeah. We can ask restaurants about their tipping policies. We can encourage them to consider alternative models like service charges or even a no tipping policy.
Yeah, we can also, support organizations that are out there advocating for fair wages and worker rights.
Mm.
And most importantly, we can tip consciously. We can make a deliberate choice to tip generously and to recognize that our tips, they're not just a reward for good service, but they're a way to kind of supplement a system that often fails to provide workers with a living wage.
It's about like using our consumer power,
Yeah.
to make a statement and to demand better for the people who serve us.
That's a powerful message to leave our listeners with. Remember, every choice we make, every dollar we spend, it has the potential to create ripple effects.
Yeah, it's time to start thinking critically about tipping and to demand a future where all workers are valued and compensated fairly.
It's time to reimagine service
Yeah.
and to create a system that reflects our values of fairness, of equality, and of respect.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of tipping. Uh, we hope this episode has sparked some critical thinking and perhaps even inspired some action.
Yeah, remember, this is just the beginning. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, on this topic. What resonated most with you? Leave us a review and let us know if you want to explore other topics related to tipping. Perhaps exploring the experiences of workers in different service industries, or examining the no tipping movement in more detail. We're always ready to explore. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.